So series, it's cybersecurity headlines.
Cyber updates from the Ukraine-Russia war, Nvidia hit by ransomware attack, and Nvidia hacks back, and half of employees use unauthorized file services at work. Some of the stories that my colleagues and I have been bringing to you this week on cybersecurity headlines. And now we get a chance for some insight, opinion, and definitely some expertise on these stories and more from our guest, Odi Lupescu, the CISO at Ethos Life. Odi, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your time.
I'm glad to be joining you.
All right. And of course, we want to thank our sponsor, Torque Security Automation Uncomplicated. Join us on LinkedIn Live. Just go to CISOseries.com. You can find all the info there and check out the Week in Review page. Find the link, join us. We've got about 20 minutes going. Obviously, the big story this week continues to be cyber attacks accompanying Russian military assaults of Ukraine. There are many breaking stories coming out of Ukraine right now. One of the most prominent of those is in cybersecurity, has to be the participation of private sector companies and groups of individuals in fighting this war in cyberspace. So this week, we've seen a volunteer IT army setting up a hack list of Russian entities, including things like infrastructure, government agencies, banks, and hosting providers. There's also a Telegram channel that was used to plan these cyber attacks that's been conducted by the IT Army. And on the private side, we've also seen tech giants, including Apple, Meta, Microsoft, TikTok, Google, Starlink, and YouTube, kind of uniting around taking different types of action to help Ukraine and thwart Russia. That's just a small subset of the companies that have kind of gotten involved here. You know, Odi, these feel unprecedented in wartime. Maybe it's just because this is the first war the entire West is paying attention to at the same time. But I have to ask your thoughts about initially, like the acts of individuals getting involved in kind of coordinating on a mass scale. I'm curious, what are your thoughts about this?
So I agree, it's unprecedented. I think it spans multiple realms here. One is I've seen a number of my peers volunteering to do something for a defense perspective and saying, what can we do to help Ukraine from a defense perspective? But then I saw the other side where someone in Ukraine, like one of their ministers were saying, come and hack Russia. And I think the two are distinctly different. We do have some laws in the US, and I think for all practical purposes, you go in and hacking what you think is a bad guy, it's a slippery slope. So it's interesting having that conversation with a number of my colleagues. Some of them wanted to do something. At the same time, is there going to be a repercussion? And are you doing the right thing? And how do you know you're doing the right thing? And going after what? So very distinct, but definitely unique. I've never seen so much passion and involvement. And I think it's a slippery slope. Go ahead.
Well, it almost reminds me, it's like if you could have joined the French Foreign Legion, but stay at your desk. Like that's kind of the difference here, is that theoretically, both on a defensive and offensive impact, the immediacy of it is kind of unparalleled.
Exactly. But I think that the problem is it becomes a precedent. And at that point, you're going to bring your own subjective decision as to what's right and wrong. So here comes a law in the US, you disagree with it, there's going to be another Telegram post, hey, let's go and do something against X, Y, and Z. So at which point it's like being a vigilante becomes a problem. So I think that's one of the concerns. It's very again unprecedented to see this. I don't know where it would lead. It could have some good and bad outcomes in the long run.
And then on the other side of it, we've seen a huge response from private companies, either, Microsoft, kind of coordinating with Ukraine about threat intelligence is kind of the headline one I've seen this week. But, just a myriad of companies either, shutting down Russian state-sponsored media, sharing of links, or providing contextual warnings in the case of Twitter, as unprecedented, or is that just kind of the modern interpretation of what usually happens in wartime?
Well, I think it's more unprecedented than in the past. It's more visible, and the companies are taking a much more visible stand. I think companies have become more active, more proactive in the way they express their views. Like if you go to GitHub, they have something about Ukraine. Now, again, I differentiate there between what Microsoft is doing and Google are doing. They're trying to provide defensive capabilities and be involved in that way. And what Apple is doing, stopping sales. Um, Again, what are you going to achieve with that? Essentially, basically, you're going to piss the local population off. They're going to be pissed at the government, or are going to be pissed at you? And are you going to create an enemy in the long run because they're going to say, "Well, look, you guys came after us, and this wasn't like the normal population, and maybe they were opposed to war as well." So, I think that's all going to do is potentially bring some resentment in the long run, and it potentially bring some attacks on other side, especially the one that are much more visible than others.
Well, we'll be keeping an update on this entire situation every day on Cybersecurity Headlines. So as more news breaks, be sure to be subscribed there for more. Second story, though, chip maker Nvidia hit by ransomware attack, but then they hacked back. The attack impacted some of its systems for 10 days, impacting the company's developer tools, but business and commercial activities were not affected. At least that's what Nvidia is saying. Bleeping Computer reported that an insider had described the security breach as having completely compromised them, and the Lapsus ransomware gang has claimed responsibility. The interesting development is later this week, according to several sources, Nvidia performed a hackback, taking over and ransoming the group's own machines, at least encrypting their hard drives. That's the extent of the damage that we know about. The group claims that they were able to generate backups that contained the breached Nvidia data, so I guess the hackback was not entirely successful. This apparently was possible on Nvidia's front because the attackers had to enroll in Nvidia's MDM to access their internal VPN, providing a connection to let Nvidia access a virtual machine used by Lapsus. Another kind of long lead in here, but an unprecedented feedback loop, it feels like, for a major company like Nvidia to perform a hackback. I'm just curious, what's your take on this? Have you seen this type of thing before?
Well, I think if things like this happen, they wouldn't necessarily be public. That would be the first thing. The other one is they didn't really hack back. I think that's a little too much hype. They used an MDM, and basically someone had to agree to, when they installed the MDM, there's some terms and conditions. So they didn't really hack back. Technically, those were devices that they legally had a right to control. So what they did, they wiped them. And so if they went beyond that, that would be quite fascinating. But I don't think we know that they've done that. So I think this is a little overhyped in terms of a hackback. I would do the same thing. And if I always thought, what would I do? Should I go after someone that I know is attacking me? And then it's like, well, is it really worth it at the end of the day? Kind of.
I guess a hackback does sound better than the attackers got EULA'd to death.
There you go. They enforced a policy on them, so that's what they did.
Yeah. All right, moving on to our next story. Fujitsu confirms an end date for mainframe and Unix system. Fujitsu has confirmed the end of the road for its mainframes and Unix server systems. Easy for me to say. It will cease to sell both by the end of the decade. Customers are by then expected to have migrated to the cloud. Support services for both portfolios will continue for the next 5 years afterwards, meaning this will be the end in 2034 for Unix servers and 2035 for mainframes. Not exactly coming down the road, tomorrow. This might sound like a tame story compared to, what's going on in the world right now, but, big iron, at least for now, not extinct. In fact, they see a ton of data processing that happens every single day, just any of your airlines, for example. Odie, I'm curious, what does a move like this by Fujitsu say about mainframes and Unix servers, or does it say more about Fujitsu itself?
I think it says more about Fujitsu itself. I think there's, you take Costco. Costco runs on mainframes. So I can't tell you for sure, but they run on mainframes. I can tell you there's a lot of smaller banks that run on AS400s. And eventually things will change, but that's been the talk since, 1990? And did anything change much? I don't know. So my take is, I don't think it's going away. The mainframe is going away. I think IBM will own it. I don't think it was a major factor. So I think it's more of a Fujitsu than a mainframe or transformational indicator that now the time they've shifted. Yes.
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, IBM, it's still a very profitable part of their company. Not the biggest line item, obviously, for them anymore, not by a long shot, but a significant part of their revenue. So they're continuing to innovate in that space. Yeah, I definitely think maybe says more about Fujitsu, and as long as there are AS400 programmers out there, someone will keep wanting to use these, right?
Well, but no, those run OS 390, and so S400 are the smallest babies. Those are like little cousins. But
Okay.
but the idea is you don't have a market growing at that point. I don't think you're going to get new companies coming up. Like Google is not going to start using mainframes. So I
Hmm.
think one of the problem is those things have hit kind of the end of the road a little while back.
Hmm.
But you still have enough usage and enough use cases where major corporations that were born in the past will continue to use them for potentially the foreseeable future, but newcomers are unlikely to pick them up. So that's probably what drives some of the economics.
All right, before we move on to our next story, I want to spend a few moments with our sponsor, Torque. There are many misconceptions about security automation, so Torque has been debunking security automation myths each day on cybersecurity headlines. Myth number 5 is you should automate all security processes. False. You should automate routine, repetitive tasks that are not subject to much conditional variance. But workflows that can't be reliably managed by automation tools, such as assessing the financial consequences of a breach or determining whether a security incident should trigger an application rollback, should remain the domain of humans. To learn more about the realities of automation, head to torque.io. All right, our next story here. Half of employees use unauthorized file services at work. Know before researchers issued a new report entitled Shadow IT is Real, which analyzes results of a global survey that focused on unauthorized cloud services and downloading content through unauthorized file sharing networks in the workplace. The report found that 1 in 2 employees use unauthorized file services in order to get their job done. I guess they couldn't say 50%. So, Odie, I mean, the report it kind of concluded to combat shadow IT, organizations should focus on strengthening their security culture and increasing employees' level of security awareness. Is that really enough? In my experience, like these file services, these people are using this because they need to get their job done and they want to do it like and signing up for a Dropbox account or a Google quickest way to send the file in that instance. Is it enough to
Yeah.
place the blame just on employees and security awareness?
No, well, know before it's a company that's how they make money. So what are they going to say? Are they going to say, "Look, you better fix up,
That's
you
fair
better
enough.
fix your broken processes and your broken user experience"? Because this is what ultimately boils down to. If you don't enable folks to do things what they need to do with the tools that you bring to the table, they're going to find something else, and it has been happening for a long time. So not surprising. Again, knowing the rules helps, but it's not about that. It's having the solutions there as well. And in a lot of places, it's really clunky to get something done. And yeah, at the end of the day, you're going to pick the path of least resistance. So
So is the challenge on a security front to enable, like if someone needs file transfer or something, like a large file transfer or something like that, to be able to react to that request in a quick and efficient manner and not have it go through committee or like for that visibility of that process to be in the employees' minds, I think, right?
So I think it's both. I think first you need is not security, but it's technology. The technology organization, and in many cases it's IT more so than engineering. You need to offer folks a way, some standard ways to do their work, and you need to know what they need to do their work, and offer them a solution. Secondly, once you offer, suppose someone doesn't have it, they need to know about it, and it needs to be a very
Hmm.
seamless way to get it. Like in our place, if someone needs access to share some files, say yes, we have a VDR. To get the access to VDR, you put a request. Guess what? It's auto approved. Depending on a number of factors, it could be auto approved. You get the access right there. You're in. So that reduces the likelihood someone will go and try to sign up on their own because we made it so easy. If you make it so easy that they use the sanction product or a sanctioned way of doing things, they're not going to go spend more time to do it, on their own. So I think that's kind of where the story is.
Yeah, it reminds me of like the best way to combat piracy is to make just things like that you pay for super convenient, and like
Mhm.
it feels like it's the same way. And again, I know convenience and security are often seemingly at odds, but like that seems to be the key to kind of get everybody on the same page.
Agree, 100%.
All right, our next story here: T-Bot Trojan brews up new features. Security researchers at Khalifi note that the Android remote access Trojan T-Bot has recently received an upgrade, where it initially focused on smishing attacks attempting to trick people into clicking on malicious links sent through infiltrated the Google Play Store through the use of malicious dropper apps. I think the most prominent one had about 10,000 downloads. Now it operates like other banking Trojans using accessibility features to overlay login pages, intercept 2FA codes. Odie, we're hearing more and more stories about malware infiltrating the Google Play Store. Has to be a concern for Google, and I imagine by extension, Apple as well, probably strengthen antitrust cases, honestly. Do you think
Right.
Google should exert greater pressure on app makers, or is it a case of buyer beware in that marketplace?
I think it's buyers beware. I don't think there's any product that, again, you have some expectations of it's like expecting that if you go to I don't know, to a third party site and you try to download software, you assume the third party has better done some diligence. I better know what the diligence was, whatever they did, and then I can draw my own conclusion if it's sufficient or not. So I think the challenge here is I don't know necessarily what Google does to vet all the software developers um, in all these applications. I believe they do some checks, but are those checks sufficient? Are they going to catch everything? And to me, the answer is probably not. And then yes, I got to do something on my own to make sure that I have some additional controls on my devices if I'm indeed concerned about this. So that's my sense. But go ahead.
I do have some, I guess sympathy for Google is the wrong word. I can understand the complexities of this because in this particular instance, these dropper apps, they're linking to additional downloads that look like for the Google Play Store, but they're coming from GitHub. And even if they vet that and they see, oh, it's pulling software from GitHub, they can also change the destination of what they're pulling from GitHub at any given point. So it's like, even if they, there are a number of factors that can change very quickly that I am tough for Google to vet. Still, like they're offering the marketplace, like it's in their best interest to not make it not saying it is a den of malware because it's 10,000 downloads, not 10
Right.
million, but like,
Right.
it's in their interest to figure it out in the long run.
It is, but I don't think they'll ever be. It's cat and mouse. I don't think you'll
Yeah.
ever catch all the mice, and I don't think the expectation. I think the expectation is that they do some checks, and you can have some level of some comfort. But I don't know that I would look at 100% at anything, even if an application has been downloaded 4 million times. Well, guess what? 4 million people may have been duped. So how do I know? I mean, is the assumption that the more something is used, the less likely it is to be malicious because someone would have caught it, if not Google. So I don't look at it as 100%. I think it's like everything else. Your laptop, Microsoft brings you Windows, but it's up to you to at some point take care of it to make sure nothing. I mean, if you want to be sure that you don't get some malicious software on Windows, you might want to put something besides Microsoft Defender. Maybe, I don't know. Same
All right. Well,
kind of deal
moving
with the
on
Google
to
Apple Store, or sorry, with the Google Store.
Well, moving on to our last story of the day. Toyota suspends Japanese production due to a cyber attack. Toyota suspended all of its 14 factories in Japan due to what a spokesperson called a supplier system failure with Kojima Industries. Kojima said it appeared to be the victim of a cyber attack. So I guess Toyota is saying this resulted in the company losing about 13,000 cars of output per day, about a third of its global production. The shutdown lasted just 24 hours and occurred shortly after Japan joined Western allies in clamping down on Russia. Now, Odie supply chains have been having a really, really bad year, I guess maybe a bad last 2 years. And if one is indeed connecting to Russia invasion, and right now, I don't believe that there is any evidence that it is just the timing is extremely suspicious. It shows that this war is being fought not just on the cyber front, but on the infrastructure front as well, not just outside of Russia, on a worldwide basis. I'm just curious about what your thoughts, seeing a major automaker like Toyota, kind of having to go dark for a day.
Well, I think to me, again, kind of going to the previous discussion, at this point, countries and companies are taking sides in a conflict. And the same way, for instance, the Japanese government said, we'll join the sanctions. By association, someone would think, well, those sanctions are economic kind of economic hostility towards Russia. So someone in Russia could say, well, that country is hostile towards us. It's kind of like a war, except it's more on the economic front. And then they're going to say, well, how can we inflict economic damage back? And then you can go to cyber, and cyber is an easy way to do that. And if they can send someone back in the analog age, that's good. I mean, really, kind of, I think that's how war is going to end up. You You have a country, you have companies. The country takes a side in a war, and the companies by association will be like, well, you're bad too, because I mean, you're in the same bucket as your government, because your government is waging economic war on me, so I'm going to wage whatever war I do on you, including cyber. So I do think this. I'm surprised. To me,
Yeah,
it was surprising
evolution.
it
It
didn't
feels
happen
like
more
of
often.
like
Go ahead.
yeah, and it feels like a kind of an update on the classic kind of blockade strategy. Countries started using in mass in the early 20th century, or effectively using in the early 20th century, but just on a much more privatized and micro.
Yeah, and I think really the economic war is fought all the time. Is between the U.S. and China, and really I think it's going to be to me it was surprising that we didn't see as much as this was just one incident. I thought there was going to be so many bad things happening. I didn't, knock on wood, I didn't see too many bad things happening, and the expectation was that they're going to go all out and they can take down Swift and they can do all kinds of bad stuff. Didn't happen. So to me, that it happened in one case, assuming it's related to this, it's it's a small thing. But my assumption would be in the future, this is going to be a lot more pervasive.
All right, well, Odie, before we get out of here, was there any story that you reacted strongly to, a thumbs up, an eye roller, anyone that just kind of stood out today?
I think the stories of people and company getting more and more involved in the war and kind of taking sides, and that's to me that was a big deal. It's a big deal. It's very, very interesting, and I think it's going to be very consequential in the future.
All right. Well, Odie Lupescu, the CISO at Ethos Life, thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you if they are so inclined to check out your work?
Well, unfortunately, I'm not terribly social, so I, I do have a LinkedIn profile. It's not public. Um, I am looking for people to join, so join my team. And kind of shameless plug-in here, but there's a couple of opportunities in LinkedIn. But yeah, I'm generally non-social. It's difficult to get a hold of me. No Twitter, no nothing. So there you have it.
So if people are interested in the positions, they can check out Ethos Life's LinkedIn page.
Exactly.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you once again. And thank you to our sponsor, Torque Security Automate. Torque Secure. Oh, let me try it again. Thank you so much to our sponsor. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Torque Security Automation Uncomplicated. Come back next week for our newly rebranded video chat, now called Super Cyber Friday, which will be about vulnerabilities. Hey, we've got the logo up here if you're watching the video feed. Hacking extreme vulnerabilities, an hour of critical thinking about the confluence of concerns across threat actors' intentions, industry targets, ransomware companies' unique weakness. That starts at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, followed by a meetup, and then we'll be back with another edition of the Week in Review on Friday, 12:30 p.m. Pacific, 3:30 Eastern. News fix through cybersecurity headlines every day. It's about 6 minutes. We'll get you all caught up. Until next week, I'm Rich Straffolino, reminding you to have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.